strange times for our country. We're dealing with a lot of issues. There's an evolution of a lot of different mindsets that are coming together, and as a result, law enforcement is kind of caught right in the crosshairs of all of this. But let's just talk about the reality of where we find ourselves as a nation. Last year, Gallup released a poll that found that 8 out of every 10 Americans are worried about crime. 53% said a great deal. 27% said a fair amount. Increased concerns over crime is followed with sharp, violent crime itself, and especially homicides in the last 6 years. And 12 major cities saw the deadliest years on record. 2022 murder rates, wasn't far behind. In Chicago, there was 695 murders. Philadelphia, 504. New York, 418. Houston, 377. Los Angeles, 373. In 2022, Philadelphia surpassed 500 murders for the second year in a row, and the third in their history. The violent crime is increasing by 50% in cities across this country, and something needs to be done. We need to recognize that the way we're doing things now is just simply not working. Now it's easy to. I gave you a whole bunch of numbers, and if you total them all up, that is a whole lot of homicides just in a handful of cities. And it's easy. Numbers are impersonal. We look at numbers and say, okay, that sounds like a lot, but let's just not forget that every one of those is a person in a family that has been affected by violent crime. Can you share your thoughts about the current crime situation that we find ourselves in cities all across this country?
Yeah, absolutely. The truth is that we're in a pretty bleak space. If you look at graphing of homicide totals, so not rates, but totals, we have erased virtually all of the decline in homicides that took place from the mid-1990s through 2014. So the last several years, because of increases, it's basically become a U at this point. We've eliminated all of those declines. Now, rates are still lower because populations are larger, but we're entering now our 8th year of really kind of heading in the wrong direction. 2020 forward gets a lot of attention, but 2015 had a sharp increase in homicides. 2016 had a sharp increase in homicides. And in a lot of the same cities that you mentioned, you're not only seeing increases in homicides, but you're seeing increases in things like drive-by shootings. You're seeing increases in things like carjackings and armed robberies. New York City ended 2022 with a slight decline in homicides, but an overall increase in other major crimes. And so the homicides are starting to get some of the attention that they deserve, perhaps, but other major crimes, other serious violent crimes are up in a lot of these large metros, and they're up in a lot of jurisdictions that aren't used to dealing with this kind of violence, right? New York City, LA, Chicago, they get a lot of attention, but the cities that you're seeing the sharpest increases over the last couple of years are sort of mid-sized cities in the middle of the country. Louisville, Kentucky went from a city that averaged 54 homicides a year for 3.5 decades to last year having 188 murders. I mean, that's a nearly 4-fold increase. Minneapolis, Minnesota, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Little Rock, Arkansas, Birmingham, Alabama, these sort of mid-sized cities in the middle of the country are starting to see these increases, and they're really not used to dealing with that level of violence.
Right. No one's immune to it. That's for certain. Yeah, it's definitely a trend we're seeing, across this country. Let's. Why is that? You've been in this system for a while, and you work it in a different perspective than I have in the law enforcement side of it. As an attorney, give me your thoughts on how we've put ourselves on a trajectory for these last 8-9 years, and how it has escalated. Because it is, now, although we've seen that trend go up, we can't argue the fact that the last 2-3 years have really escalated at a far greater pace than the previous years. What do you see as the driving factors of these things?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that folks don't really understand is how rational most criminal actors are, right? And by that, I don't mean that they make decisions the same. They don't come to the same conclusions that you or I would, perhaps because their information is less perfect than ours is. But they respond to the scenarios around them. When there's a heavy law enforcement presence, they're not going to commit a crime. When there's less of a law enforcement presence, they're more inclined to commit a crime. And what you've seen over the last several years are a remarkable number of policy changes, both in terms of legislation and departmental policy changes in police departments all across the country, some of which was well-intended response to COVID, right? Like the idea of sort of trying to slow the spread by having law enforcement interact with the community less is a well-intended policy that on its face really has nothing to do with crime. But when cops are less omnipresent in a neighborhood, the illegitimate means of controlling the neighborhood, oftentimes in the form of things like criminal street gangs, tend to rise up and tend to become more active. And that's what you're seeing all across the country. Crime, especially serious violence, is relatively concentrated among a relatively small number of offenders. And those guys got more active over this time period. It's not as if average Americans became more violent. It's that the people who are inclined towards serious criminal activity were able to do it more frequently.